Welcome to Masters of Real Estate. My name is Mathew Owens. Today I have a special guest, Andy McQuade, on this call today to talk all about multifamily and some of the strategies that he's utilized in the past to build wealth, create financial freedom in him and his investors and different people's lives, and kind of the operational components as well of the efficiencies of multifamily. So thanks, Andy. Really appreciate you coming on board today and talking with everybody in my base and teaching people the right ways to do business in the multifamily space. So could you give a little detailed background on yourself so people understand a little bit more about your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually spent the first 22 years of my career on the supply side. So I started at a lumber yard when I was 17 years old, driving a forklift,
Nice.
sweating like a pig, 14-hour days, doing just the BS work. Actually, I can't say it was all BS work because I was a store manager, but at 22, I was an outside sales manager with an $8 million team at 23, almost 24. And then I did outside sales for a little tiny bit, did some really cool, huge projects, learned a ton of stuff about actually how stuff goes together in the field that I wasn't learning in the shop, in the store, right? Sales floor type stuff. And then I was headhunted by a box store, Home Depot. Some of you might have heard of them. And I was a district manager for them for 11 years over pro. And during that period, I actually focused the last 3.5 years that I was there on multifamily, specifically owner-operators. And I had them teach me what was important so I could sell them stuff. So by the time I left, I had accounts spending between $1 and $7 million a year with me doing their rehabs, their renos. I was on a plane with their
Awesome.
Executive team all over the country, walking properties, doing due diligence, finding stores that could actually work with them, how they could, stock product in the stores, in the overhead specific for a property that was getting a turn so they didn't have to rent containers and drop them on site. Managed all the inventory flow, ordered stuff from China. I was doing everything. It was crazy, but huge learning experience. I got a ton of face time with C-level operators.
That's awesome.
Doing, millions, and literally some of them had billions of dollars in properties under management, which was great. I had one client with 34,000 doors in 17 states.
Ooh, wow, that is crazy. And I thought we had a good operation with our housing system and stuff, and it was great to work with guys like you when we were, dealing with that, where it's like, hey, all of our needs, here's everything on a pallet waiting for you for your project, everything ordered, finding the right discounted, things, going through and saying, hey, don't buy this one, it's better for you, it costs you less money, massive amounts of savings. And you probably learned every aspect of renovation through that process too, I would assume, or a very big chunk of it.
Oh yeah, more than I ever planned on. I learned so much just through absorption, asking questions, trying to avoid problems, because you sell stuff and then all of a sudden it's not working right, or something's missing, or something's broken, or it's failing prematurely in the field, and you're like, oh my God, how do I not have to ever do this again? Because this is hell. I don't like this. I don't want to have to fix this. This is my problem. And at the Big Orange Box, in case you're not familiar, they don't like to fix problems. So I did, because I valued those relationships I was building. So I was like, no, this ain't going to work. So I found ways to just not have the problem to begin with. And it eventually turned into what I do now, which is the TCO method, which is total cost of ownership. So I help people and operators, specifically owner operators who are vertically integrated, who have the ability to control, right? Because third-party management will never change for you.
Right.
They have the ability to control what's happening. You just put the things in place. So when you're purchasing, you go, well, okay, it's cheaper right now, but what is that going to cost me in year 2, in year 3, in year 4, in year 5? You're flipping, not a conversation for flipping. If you're going to be in a syndication that's time limited, right? You're going to have to unload that property in 2 or 3 years, depending on the business plan, or maybe you're going to refinance and hold it now because it's a different environment than it was when some of those syndications started. Right. So what we're looking at is, how is this going to affect me down the road? And part of the my weird background coming into this business is that because I'm familiar with the technical side, right? I can still read blueprints, do takeoffs, do estimates, do all that stuff. I don't. Right. It's not my job anymore. But I know all the technical stuff on how the stuff works in the field, what fails, what doesn't, what's resilient, what's not. I worked for a reclaimed wood company for a year as a sales manager, running the entire everything for Japan, Canada, and across the U.S. We did stuff for Amazon and Facebook, and we did the Harvard Living Building Challenge expansion. Sold them some crazy beautiful engineered wood that we had to build from scratch. Learned so much about just all of the green, crunchy stuff that no one in real estate really cares about. But there are actually products out there that can save money over time. But you got to just be careful with what you believe, because a lot of it is just greenwash nonsense that costs you more upfront and over time. So
Right.
it's all about what's really resilient, what's really going to work in this particular application, because no one wants to eat mistakes
Right.
at all.
And-
So
and
how
I-
do you
I think-
avoid them?
I think we as real estate investors get paid to solve problems, right? And things like that consistently. But not a lot of people talk about how to mitigate the mistakes that you and your team makes, or how to deal and dive into the deep operational efficiencies of running a real estate business or a multifamily asset specifically, or any other, asset class, and how that operations works. A lot of private investors that come in and want to invest in these types of opportunities don't understand, first, the due diligence that has to be done up front on these projects in depth, right? But then they're also, they don't know what questions to ask if they don't understand the keys to proper operations on the back end, to know if the operators are actually operating with that level of efficiency, right? And, we used to run a property management company and, flipped 1,000 houses, lending capital to flippers all over the market, all over the country. And, with these different aspects of it, you realize the importance of these efficiencies across the board, and being able to dial in every aspect of property management, every aspect of asset management, and, cost cutting components and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little, you mentioned total cost of ownership, and that structure of, I'll say, asset management and, acquisition. And can you talk a little bit about what that means and the depth of the conversation when you're saying total cost of ownership, and how to, implement that strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's TCO, total cost of ownership, has been around since the mid 80s. It started as an IT thing, right? So people, when they were buying technology, would want to know, well, what's this technology going to cost me? So I want to buy the servers. I need to figure out what the electricity is going to cost. How much is it going to cost to cool those server rooms? Blah, blah, blah. All the labor, software updates, upgrades, maintenance, component failures, blah, blah, blah. So what's that going to cost me from the day I install it till the day I get rid of it? And then what do I have to pay to dispose of it, right? So what's my disposition cost at the end going to be? How do I get rid of this thing, recycle it, do whatever, right? Whether I sell it to somebody, or whether there's all sorts of costs involved. You can't really do that with real estate, because there's too many inputs. Every market is different. Every building is different.
Right.
Every tenant is going to treat the property differently. But it's not necessarily about knowing what the total cost of ownership is going to be. It's about figuring out how to minimize the costs by planning ahead. So you change your decision making from, I need a toilet. What toilet am I going to buy? I'm going to go to Home Depot and buy the $69 toilet. Oh, they don't have that anymore. It's $99 now, right? Because of COVID. But I'm going to go to Home Depot. I'm going to buy the $99 toilet. Well, that $99 toilet is going to cost you a lot more in the long run than like a $200 toilet that maybe is built better, has no flapper, uses less water, right? So it's little decisions like that. Yeah, I'm going to pay $100 more now, but what is my maintenance call when I have a leaky flapper? Or what does it cost me when a tenant moves out because they have a leaky toilet that never gets fixed because they never bother to call you? Right. So you've got all sorts of opportunity costs that you need to avoid. So we look at, when we're talking about total cost of ownership, we go, okay, well, what's the acquisition cost for, maybe it's a property, maybe it's a toilet. What does it cost to operate it? What's the maintenance cost? Well, if my maintenance cost on something like a battery-operated smoke detector, right? They're $5. You put a 9-volt battery in, you put 2 AA's in, whatever. But then you have to replace those batteries every year, every 6 months, maybe, if you're buying the cheap ones, right? The no-name generic brand garbage. So you're buying these junk batteries. What does the labor cost you to go into those units on a schedule every 6 months or every year and replace those batteries? Is it cheaper to buy the 10-year, $15 smoke detector that you never have to worry about, or is it cheaper to buy the batteries every single year and then pay the labor every single year to continuously do it over and over and over again?
Right.
People don't think about stuff like that. So it's
I think
some awareness.
Understanding that concept and realizing that, hey, bad materials costs or trying to be cheap on projects costs you 10 times more. And you actually know this from, it is actually relevant to the flipping space massively, because, if you go sell it afterwards, it's going to come up on an inspection report as well. You might be able to be cheap, or it's going to affect you on the price on the back end sale of the asset as well. And having to redo things, right? You buy cheap stuff and your HVAC system burns out on you, right away, or it becomes faulty. There's so many little things that can come up, with property ownership, like you mentioned, that, looking at that long-term strategy there, I think is really, really important to say, yeah, it might cost me this much more on CapEx, but how much am I going to be able to reduce my expenses by not having extra CapEx later, which is actually where true profitability comes in on the back end, right? If all of a sudden you're able to, through all these methods, cut your CapEx and cost down by 20% or something like that through those methods, you've just increased revenue by that much, or net income by that much as well, which is an exponential gain on your valuation on the back end because of the performance of that asset. And so, a lot of people don't think about that. They're like, well, I can't make this deal work because CapEx is too high, or, then don't buy the deal at the end of the day,
Right.
or it better still work on your back end with more CapEx. And if you're going to be cheap and just do cleanup of unit or something like that, sometimes that's a better strategy depending on what you're looking at on the back end or the particular market that you're in. If you're in a lower end market and nobody's going to care if you got granite versus Formica countertops or something, or, that kind of difference, or, obviously granite's not super expensive, but, if you're talking about 100 units, the cost adds up, right? But those things might last a lot longer than, the cheapy countertops that you would normally put in a rental property they might look good initially, but at the end of the day, they break. They have the strips that come off the sides. They got just maintenance that comes up on these types of, assets. So, and how did you get involved in this level of, what made you focus more on the efficiency side of things? What hurt you to make you want to do this, and put you in the right place to have that mentality?
So when I was over at the Reclaimed Wood place, it was great. I learned a lot. It was not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Partially politically, but partially, it was a lot of just people who don't understand sales trying to be salespeople, and it just hurt my head.
Right.
So I had a call. One of my old clients at the time, they managed about 12,000 doors. They're a little over 20,000 doors. It was a family office. They sold the real estate operation off a few years ago. The original owner is still on the chairman of the board. I still talk to him once in a while. His name's Tim. He's an awesome guy.
Awesome.
But one of the VPs I used to work with when I was at the box called me. He goes, "Hey, they just gave me, my title changed. I went from special services. Now I'm procurement and risk management. You know everything we buy, what we did, who else we buy from, why we do things we do. You got time for coffee?" Okay, sure. So I took a morning off from the Reclaimed Wood place. I bounced over to met him for coffee. A half-hour coffee became a 3.5-hour coffee. Turned almost into lunch, right? So it was a little over the top. I think we went through like three or four coffees, each. And at the end of it, he goes, "Why aren't you just doing this full time?" I don't know. Why am I not doing this full time? So I'm like, "You gonna hire me?" and he's like, "Yeah, okay." So I filed an LLC 2 weeks later. A couple weeks after that, I had started shopping for insurance, put the websites up, started getting all the marketing crap put together, figured out the business name, got my contract started with my attorney, which is modified now after COVID because we learned some things the hard way, and my 1-year anniversary was coming up, and I had a choice to renew or leave, exit the company. The boss was flying in from Portland, Oregon, because we had 2 offices, one here and one in Oregon, and 2 production facilities, the whole 9 yards. It was a good setup. He flies in April 30th. My anniversary date's May 14th. I'm like, "Well, give him my 2 weeks." Give him my 2 weeks. He's like, "You just leave." I'm like, "Well, all right. See ya." Here's my credit card, my key for the door, all my computer crap. I packed up all my stuff.
So he
hugged a
said
bunch of
leave
people,
after
said
you gave him the
goodbye.
2 weeks. He didn't even give you the 2 weeks. Said,
The second
okay.
time that's happened, when I left 84 Lumber to go to Depot when I was headhunted, I told a couple people and somebody ratted me out and they walked me out the door the day of. It was like different customers, man. Like
That's
I don't know
crazy.
what to tell you.
Yeah,
It's fine.
there's some vindictive people out there. You learn
Well,
that the hard way through real estate too.
They don't give you your own phone. Like you use your personal phone. What do you think I'm gonna go and not be able to call these people? You're
That's
out of
crazy.
your minds. Go ahead, walk me out. What do I care?
That's awesome.
But so anyway, he asked me why I don't do it full time. So I said, okay, I'll do it full time. So starting in basically May of 2019, I started. In the last 5 years now, right? I have, as of this recording, because it's 22nd of 24, May 22nd, 24. I have helped a few dozen operators generate an extra $98 million in asset value by increasing their NOI by over $6 million. So it's like 6.2 million as of a couple weeks ago when I redid the math.
All from diving deep into their current operations and helping them from an asset management standpoint.
Correct. So part of it is obviously buying stuff at a better price, pre-planning, organizing, building systems to scale, operations, et cetera, et cetera. Some of it is just eliminating future costs down the road through more efficient things. Some of it's finding grants to do energy and water green up projects. Some of it's been, well, why aren't we increasing the lifespan between turns on these units? Like you're putting in a laminate floor. It's basically cardboard with a picture of wood on it. And as soon as something leaks, you're going to have an issue. Oh, yeah. You're putting water in the doors and ice makers and all of your C properties. Are you out of your mind? Like you have 3 floors. The top floor they decide to clean behind the fridge for some reason because they're unlike 98% of your other clients.
Right.
And you've got a huge water leak because nobody disconnects the water from behind the refrigerator before they pull it out to clean. It just snaps that elbow off, and then you've got a broken fridge and a leak.
Right.
So, like, there's all these things that we've been able to do and put together, and some of it's education, and some of it's process, and some of it's going in at the beginning of a CapEx and just saying, hey, let's do this instead of this, and okay, well, you're going to pay a little more now, but then you're going to get actual ROI. You're actually going to have a product that you install pay for itself instead of costing you more down the road.
Right.
So it's shifting that mindset from buying stuff is a cost center and a money sink to buying stuff as an investment in
a profit center.
Future profitability for the business, right? So highest value procurement. You'll hear that sometimes in procurement circles, like my original company name was ARM Procurement Advisors, and everybody's eyes freaking glazed over because they're like, procurement?
What does that mean?
Real estate. I don't do procurement. What is that? Fancy government stuff. So I gave up on the procurement thing. I put a DBA in place for the ARM companies. I put a DBA in place for TCO method, and I got a trademark for TCO method now. So, like, it's a different animal. Same basic process. I get more into the labor side and more into the maintenance and cost avoidance, risk management. I help them with dealing with underwriters for their insurance. Like, insurance costs have skyrocketed. Well, what if we're doing things that make the property more resilient? We're making sure that stuff is being done in a timely fashion. We're making sure that we're not deferring maintenance on the property.
Right.
Like, is there a way to creatively underwrite on this? You know, and sometimes it becomes a conversation where they've got so many doors, they put a captive in place. And when when you start talking about captives, and it's a whole different, ball of yarn that you have to deal with, but it works.
So you're going through every expense line item, and you're basically saying, how do I improve the value here across the board, and how do I increase the operational efficiencies? And I would assume that it has a lot to do with the initial processes and procedures, not just on the initial renovation side of this, but also, long-term asset management approach, proper leasing procedures, proper eviction procedures, proper, efficiencies across the board in all these areas that really, you find property managers in these markets, and if you're not vertically integrated, you're relying on an outside management company, and that becomes difficult, where you're either going to be managing your own people with an in-house management team, or you're going to be asset managing and managing someone else's team to do that work. And it depends on what the profitability is and how much control you can have over them and how big your project is if you can actually go and implement something like that yourself, because you have to have a little bit of scale to cover that and bring in the right people and the right number of doors and everything. But I would assume that, you're focused quite a bit on, every aspect of this from a asset management. If you're improving valuation, would you say $98 million worth of value add
5 years,
by just coming in and helping with that? You know how many operators that would love to see that? And you know how many investors would love you too if you did that for different companies, especially now with the way the market is going in multifamily, or at least what we've seen in the last year and a half or so, or a couple of years now, after the rates took that change. Obviously, we saw a lot of turmoil where now a lot of people are having trouble with the refinance aspect of this because even if they're hitting their metrics that they thought they were, the numbers changed now with all they can't refinance and get the same money out as they could before. So these operational efficiencies become even more important because it will save your butt when you have a change in the market. And the people that have really good operations are the ones that are going to survive at the end of the day, assuming they didn't totally screw up in the beginning, which can happen because people weren't expecting rates to go up as much and as fast as they did. Of course, people are going to be stuck in certain circumstances, right? So
yeah. I mean, we saw between insurance increases, especially in coastal states in the South, Florida, Texas, Arkansas,
it's insane, right?
Louisiana. We saw prices spike on insurance through the roof, which it just erodes asset value completely, right? I knew one guy who had not a lot of doors, and he lost $1.5 million in asset value just from his insurance bill changing. He didn't change carriers. He didn't change coverage. He started scrambling, right? He calls me. He's like, Andy, I just lost like $1.6 million overnight. What do I do?
Right.
Well, I don't really have a good answer for you, but you got to pay your bill.
Yeah. Pay your bill, and we'll find another solution if we can.
We'll help you dig out of this, but there's no I can't promise anything. And then we've seen, I've had a couple of people I deal with who the banks have done them a solid. They're like, listen, you're not going to build equity, but we'll extend this out 5 years, 10 years, and you'll make your payments. You'll cash flow again. You'll be able to pay your investors on some of these waterfalls. You're not going to make them all, right? But hopefully you don't have to pause distributions for too long. But they're not going to have equity at the end of this unless something changes in the macro market, just because there's no way for us to recover 30% or 40% of asset value when the bank owns 85% of it, right? It's
the only way that's going to work is if all of a sudden wages skyrocketed, because over time, and right now with a potential looming economy or looming recession coming, or maybe already in one potentially, then that may not occur with wages, of course, when there's downward pressure on wage, and so that's obviously can hurt affordability as well and reduce rents even potentially. So there is some additional dangers. So, buying multifamily right when you're buying it now, especially, I think is very important. And in my underwriting, I'm even pretending on any refinances or anything that the rates of rising further, than falling, and trying to be conservative on my cap rates on sale of these assets where, if I'm projecting, if my current cap rate is 6, I might say, look, it's only going to sell at a 7 cap instead, and, pretend like everything crashed and if I'm still okay, then I'm doing all right on my my cash flow returns and all that stuff. Then okay, and then of course the debt piece is the most important aspect right now, especially because if you're looking at the amount of available lenders out there that want to lend in this environment where they're not sure where rates are going to go. You got Fannie and Freddie coming in and doing the big bulk of this stuff from a finance standpoint. There are other lenders for sure out there doing their business, but they're being more conservative on their side. They're going, wow, we don't want this cheap paper anymore, and we're not going to sit here, and now we got to sit on this 3-4% paper. It's absolutely insanely horrible. Let's not do that again. Let's make sure we have adjustable rates and provisions for build in on their side, on the lending side, for any increases that could occur, and a way to call it due faster if they're running into problems. And we've seen a lot of lenders not give the CapEx because they're like, you could hit all your metrics, but then they're holding the rehab reserve, and they're like, well, your value is now lower, so your loan to value metrics are messed up, so we're not giving you that money. You need to go do a capital call from your investors for that money that's involved. And so you're seeing that happen, especially with the the actual the insurance costs, like you said, and at what point does it make sense to go to a captive policy? And can you explain that for the audience, like what a captive is, and of course, what kind of savings that can be, and what kind of scale you need to have for that to actually start making sense?
So essentially, a captive. And I'm not an insurance broker; I don't sell insurance. So I have partners that I bring in to do that. So this is just my understanding of it. When I say, "Hey, have you done this or have you looked at this?" It's on my checklist because it works for people, and I've had plenty of clients who do it. So basically, a captive is you self-insure for a certain amount of dollars of loss. So it's like having a really high premium, like $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. So any insurance claims that would be filed against your company or your property for whatever, slips and falls, any of the roofing damage, storm damage, whatever, you're going to just eat that out of your cash reserves that are in a separate company. It's a separate operating entity, whole different set of rules. You're opening a separate business, and you're just going to eat that. Now, if you have no claims, you keep the money. It's profit. If you have claims, then you have to pay out of it until you hit whatever. But what it does is it gives the insurance companies a blanket out, because you're going to draw off your captive before you draw off of an insurance claim from an actual insurance provider.
Okay.
So they're going to give you significant discounts in your rates for your properties, and you can then make sure, well, I'm not underinsured. I'm not going to have a building burn, and because I decided to do ACV instead of replacement cost, well, I can't buy depreciated drywall at 2 cents a sheet. That doesn't exist, so I'm stuck paying $8 a sheet instead of 2 pennies, which is what this 40-year-old building is worth.
Right.
Like, how do I get out of this? Well, you don't have those issues when you put a captive in place, because hopefully at the same time you're doing a captive, you're putting some sort of risk management program there. So we're talking about operators with, like my client base is thousands of doors. That's usually where I start to get involved, because we can scale. So I'll normally come in, get my foot in the door on a rehab, and then when we double the value of a property in a year, then suddenly it becomes, okay, well, now we want to look at the whole portfolio and figure this out. So that's kind of where like the discussion on captives, and then you get into like costing and stuff. But NOI, increasing NOI, doesn't include CapEx, doesn't include cash reserves, doesn't include debt payments, debt service. So most of what I try to do when I'm adding value is focusing on, well, what's the return on the NOI over time? So doing a CapEx right at the beginning, even though you're going to spend more, well, guess what? It's a one-time thing.
Right.
If you're going to sell
it could create a 25% increase in revenue long term and on that cost, and so which at a 7 cap is an insane valuation difference, right?
Absolutely.
So or 6
well,
cap.
6 cap. I figure my numbers at a 6 cap roughly.
Yeah.
Like some of them were lower, obviously, some of them are higher, but a lot of it, because it's value add property, a lot of it is, D's and C's moving to C pluses and B minuses. A couple luxury properties here and there, but not a lot, because it's not as important for them, because they can always just reach into deeper pockets. You know what I mean? I hate to say it like that, but it really is. There really is an attitude of it's the cost of doing business, and they just don't really care. Which is weird, because it's a lot of it is still investor money. So for them to not care is odd to me, but it is whatever. It is what it is, right? Which good from my house if my name's not on it. So,
right. I think the biggest takeaway here is to make sure you're focusing as a real estate investor on your operational efficiencies. If you get to a couple thousand doors, you can reach out to Andy, and he'll help you out with that aspect of things, of course, and dialing it all for you, which is really, really important. But learn all of the different things, even as a small operator, that Andy's talking about the operational efficiencies of an asset, how to actually go through and put together a proper plan to reduce costs long term and put that money into the infrastructure up front so it stops those headaches, and then put the right proper processes and procedures in place and checks and balances to reduce those costs. Similar to the water in the fridge thing that you mentioned earlier, where it's like you're just asking for problems the way you do your rehab. Of course, if you can not do PVC flooring and and not have and have better flooring in place that lasts longer or multiple tenants long, you really massively reduce your turnover costs, which is significant and probably the biggest expense that you other than I'll say defaulted rents and that kind of stuff that could be a big expense as well from any turnover. But, the turnover costs of a unit are what you want to avoid. You want people staying in properties for 5+ years. And if that means proper tenant quality control and proper tenant retention programs where you're making sure they are part of a community and that they feel happy living there, and doing those extras, because those things save you so much money long term. It's insane, because you're able to retain tenants for a really long time and do rent ready every 5 years instead of 3 potentially if you have a bad manager, or even 1 a year sometimes if you're really horrible, so and I think these things are really key. And so, Andy, how do people reach out to you if they want to get in touch with you about some of this stuff and learn more, or get involved if they have a big portfolio that you can help them with?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I spend a lot of time on the social media side. I don't have a VA filtering messages or anything there. You can find me. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and whatever too, but I don't spend a lot of time there and don't really care about them as much. AndyMcQuade.com. It's got my website. It needs to be updated because it's more about what I was doing post-pandemic than what I've been doing, on the real estate side. And then TCOmethod.com has the podcast and some articles and some other stuff. It's being updated as we speak. It's all I changed insurance providers, so now all of a sudden I need disclaimers on everything because of what I talk about on the show. So I'm kind of stuck with this limbo where all of the episodes that have already been published, like 30 plus of them, need to have this crazy disclaimer like, what I'm saying is not legal, financial, or blah, blah, blah advice. You need to, consult with your team and whatever. So
for sure. Yeah. And that kind of stuff is always important across the board to, make your insurance providers happy so they don't have an out to not pay you if something occurs. So totally understand. And if you guys need more information on how to actually dial in and understand how to check if your operators or investors that you're working with are dialing in their operations correctly, I have a 200-point due diligence checklist on my website you guys can download that includes those things, those specifics on the management side and the long-term side that are very important to be able to understand. Does an operator understand these things from an efficiency standpoint to be able to make the deal work correctly, no matter what may happen with economic volatility in the meantime? So if you guys want that, you can go to MathewOwens.com, and hopefully you guys got some good information out of this on how to run your multifamilies more efficiently and what to look for as a passive investor when you're investing with different operators to see if they have their stuff dialed in and they know what they're doing on their side. So thanks so much, Andy. Really appreciate you having taken the time today, and definitely look forward to talking to you again in the future on some of this stuff. That's awesome.
Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate the time.
Talk to you soon. Do you want to learn how to create financial freedom in your life through real estate and take your investing business to the next level? If so, you can follow us in one of the following ways. First, you can take one of our free webinars on how to analyze property, how to raise capital for real estate, and how to market and find deals. 3 of the key pillars to becoming a successful real estate investor. Number 2, you can join us on our mailing list where you'll get tips and tricks on real estate investing directly to your inbox. And number 3, you can take our 6-month real estate course that teaches you every aspect of real estate investing you can think of, and more importantly, create financial freedom in your life through real estate investing strategies that I teach. If you want a master's in real estate in 6 months, this course is for you. We're going to go over how to raise money, promissory notes, syndications, fixing and flipping, buy and hold investing, tax and legal structures, self-directed retirement accounts, financial education, how to run a business, how to market and find your deals, and most importantly, how to create that financial freedom in your life so that you can stop trading your time for money and create passive real estate cash flow that you can live off of. If you're interested, go ahead and click on one of the links below, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the other side.